call the Regional Agreement Committee reconvening after might be a time turn, 4:30 p.m. On 10/23/24. If we could just stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will function as chair at this point until we can appoint the chair. Right now, we are missing two members that are voting. Actually, I'll go right to public comment. Would you like to say anything? Smile for the camera. And I'll tell you you're going to be on camera. Don't eat too much of that candy. So no one here for public comment, but let's just reintroduce the membership of this committee since we haven't done it for a while. So Steve, do you mind starting?
Steve Amico, Hanson Finance Committee.
Kathleen Otina, Whitman Finance Committee.
Lisa Green, Hanson Town Administrator.
Meredith Garner, Whitman Town Administrator.
Justin Evans, Whitman Select Board.
George Farrell, Assistant Superintendent.
Jeff Simonek, Superintendent.
Hillary Niffen, Hanson School Committee.
Stephen Marshall, Director of Business and Finance.
So Steve's a new member of our team. Rosemary Hill is the appointee from the school committee as a voting member, and Laura Kemet, the chair of the Hanson Select Board, is also, and Laura notified us that she would be here. Got a text out to Rosemary to see if she's on her way. The next business item was the appointment of the chair, and I do believe I need a quorum or 3 votes. I'm just trying, I don't have my Robert's rules here,
I believe so.
but I'm not sure if we can even take a conversation about chair. I will function as that. I don't want to misstep as we go, but we can select the chair at the next meeting or once we have a quorum if someone comes in. Next item is.
Could I ask a question? Should we just talk about the voting rules and like what it looks like, even though there's 8 or 9 members, and then there's just for the new folks
Sure. So
live watching or will be watching?
So
live?
a redo of how this works. There are 4 voting members of the Regional Agreement Committee, 2 members from Hanson and 2 members from Whitman, 1 select person and 1 school committee person, and 1 select board member and 1 school committee person. So there are only 4 votes. I do not vote, thankfully. I don't want to be the tiebreaker. We will help as the school district folks to share what we need in part from the regional agreement. There's a vested interest from the finance committee in this agreement, the TAs especially, and then all this will go back to the select boards as a process. Once this team figures it out, and as we go, we're hoping that the finance committee brings back pieces, the select and then board members bring back pieces, and we will bring back pieces. The eventual goal is to have a nice document in front of town meeting that the voters will approve. The goal would be May. I don't know if we'll get there because of all these steps in between. And the Commissioner of Ed, once it's voted at town meeting, we will give the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education Commissioner a draft, kind of get all the pieces that might have some questions out before town meeting and ratified through all of our boards, brought to town meeting, and once town meeting approves the new regional agreement or the modification of the regional agreement, he will then sign off on that. So there's a lot of layers to this process. We started this in 2022. We got some good work done in 2023, and we kind of hit a stop in January of 2024 around some things that we have talked about, which we'll discuss here. But I think some of the language we cleaned up quite a bit, so it won't be I don't think months and months and months of work, but it might be some time going back and forth to boards and their opinions on different things and how it affects both communities. The last official agreement was done in '91. There was a redo in 2017 and 18, and we all can remember there were a lot of things done to that. It passed in one town, then didn't pass in another town, and then the other town came back and said, we don't pass it. Then we had an assessment adjustment in 2020, where we modified the assessment, which is still in play, but we're still kind of working off the 1991 agreement. That being said, we took the 2018 structure and kind of worked through that language to modify to 2022, 2023, and now we're in 2024 going into 2025. So some of that language might change, but the big picture items, I think, in language addressed, and then the ones that haven't been addressed are the real talking points on, off the top of my head, leases right now, and the state, and that there's different governing bodies in there, meaning the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and the Mass Association of School Buildings, the MSBA, and the leases might not have even come into this if not for building a new project in Whitman, when leases became a hot button topic for the Whitman Middle School Building Committee. I had our association of the Mass Association of Regional Schools. We had a presentation from Mac and Steve last year. They tried to address some things, but it also took, if you follow some of the email trail that I sent out, MSBA and DESI were not talking at all, and the big players in both weren't coming to consensus on what the leases were or what they should be. What we've been told is MSBA will only accept a lease in a new building or a building project of 50 years. DESI says 20, so we're trying to work through that piece of it, and I have some language in here, suggested language from Michelle Griffith, who is one of the associate commissioners of finance from DESI. The other piece is transportation, non-mandated transportation, and how we work through how that's billed to the towns. We have a certain way that we're doing it right now, around the non-mandated, and how we do mandated transportation. And then we're going to bring up something that it's not as far as a talking point before. We talked a little about capital and emergency capital, but I think after going through this process last year of capital, we'd like to have some more language in here as far as capital committee and money for capital as we go forward, to give the towns an opportunity to budget for capital, and the regional school district an opportunity to start planning some projects without worrying about funding and big funding or little funding as we go. So does that summarize pretty much what you were thinking of? Let's see. Okay, Rosemary is on her way, so maybe we can get a chair by the end of the meeting. So, recap of what's accomplished, it's kind of in your packet a little bit, and I don't want, I think for the new folks, just go through. Stephen's been briefed a little bit. Rosemary, as soon as she was appointed, I was able to give her a packet, so she should have an understanding of what we've done so far. And again, the big ticket items, or the language around certain things, I think were worked on, understood, and pseudo sent back to the communities as far as the towns and the selectmen and the select board and the finance committees. And I don't know if they were hard agree or not, but there wasn't much back and forth to make some changes. So I kind of want to, we can always revisit that language as we go through, but I don't want to go through every bullet point right now. It's reading items, and we've already talked about it at length. What I really wanted to talk about was the lease language a little bit, and see if we can get a little consensus on that, or if I can go back to Mars and Mac and say, this is what they're thinking. And it's really in your packet. It's the lease of the middle schools, this page right here. This is the recommendation we got from Michelle, and he wanted to have us run it by the committee first to digest, to see if it's something that we were thinking. So I'm just going to read it into the record so that people at home know what we're talking about. Lease of elementary and middle schools, obviously the regional high school is co-owned, and it's shared at 60-40. The town of Whitman and the town of Hanson are each hereby authorized to lease district buildings, facilities, grounds, equipment, and educational materials. Each lease shall be the term for not more than 20 years. The leases may contain provisions for extension in accordance with provisions under MGL Chapter 71, Section 14C, as amended. It is the intention of the member towns that all such leases related to any buildings that is constructed with MSBA funds on town-owned land will be renewed such that the building shall be maintained as a school consistent with MSBA requirements, which require an anticipated useful life of at least 50 years as a public school in the school district. The district and the member towns will use best efforts to meet this requirement. The town of Whitman and the town of Hanson shall receive no rental for the leases. The leases shall contain provisions authorizing the district to make minor repairs and minor improvements or alterations to the building or any part thereof. The district shall pay all ordinary expenses of maintaining and operating the building and keeping them in good repair during the term of the lease. Nothing contained in the leases shall prevent the committee from permitting the use of the buildings or premises by the town of Whitman and the town of Hanson. So that was the recommendation by Michelle, adding that in red for the folks. That's kind of the second area that I was talking to after 14C. That's the recommendation. So it's kind of assumed that it's a 20-year lease with the assumption it's going to be renewed as a school building for another 20, and then for another 10, and then onward and forward.
Will MSBA accept that?
I'm gonna write it in there, and this goes to, it says 50 years.
Well, it says useful life
Right.
of 50 years, it doesn't say a lease of 50 years.
I think if.
So I guess that's what I'm wondering, whether they're gonna come back and kick it back and say, it's gotta be a lease for 50 years.
So I'm not sure, but it's something we can ask and see what they have to say.
Right.
I think they're less, George.
Yeah. I will say, this is probably the first words that try to bridge the gap
Right.
between what MSBA is saying
Exactly.
and what DESI is saying. So I think if we throw it to them, then let them, at least force them to say, maybe they can clarify what it is.
Right.
You know,
I'm
but I don't
just-
know, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you put some sort of language in there that says that at the end of 20 years, it'll automatically renew for another 20 years. And at the end of that 10 years, it'll automatically renew for another 10 years.
Yeah.
Just, kind of an automatic renewal. You're not saying that it's a 50-year lease, but you're saying it's a
True.
50-year lease.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well,
Just a thought.
It says that it says land will be renewed such that, consistent with the requirements, like that phrase, like it's in there, but it's not in there.
Right, but what I'm saying is that MSBA requires that 50 years in there. And if you can just put in there that it will automatically renew after 20 years for another 20 years, and automatically renew for another 10
Right.
years after that, you've got your 50 years coverage without
Right.
doing a 50-year lease.
So I think we can write that into.
Yeah,
You know,
just a thought.
And if we get this through now, at one point when Hanson builds a building in the next 15, 20 years, whatever, it's already there. You know, with the expectation in the regional agreement itself, that this is what's expected, so MSBA won't have the argument that they had with us 2 summers ago about 10 versus 20 versus 50, when we couldn't figure out what they were talking about and why, especially when the law says 20 years.
So, I'm wondering from a discussion standpoint, if we're not voting on anything, if we could do something like A or B, and then put in the 20, 20, and 10, automatic renewal lease. So now they have 2 things. So now it shows at least we're really trying.
Yeah.
And it says 2 things to hopefully sort of pigeonhole the 2 groups to talk, so we can at least get one answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that can be the recommendation, and when we do have another meeting, that's something we can, once it's voted on here, or agreed with head nods, we can bring back to the boards as another part of this agreement, and Jen will update that for our next meeting.
Just one brief comment. I'm going to think that in the future, some MSBA projects will be in the same boat in other districts.
Yes.
We're going to face the same police problem, so we are
Such a
not,
vote.
we're not,
Well, yeah.
they lease the land, or does the VOTEC own the land? That's
That's
the
a good
kind of
question.
question. That's the
VOTEC
kind of question.
owns the land.
Yeah, probably.
Whereas there are other regional
Gotcha.
schools that are building schools, it's like, they're gonna face the same things.
Yeah.
So I don't think the 2 towns have any issue with this.
Yeah.
It's like, let the lawyers figure out.
Yeah,
right,
Let
right.
MSBA and DESI have
I
an
would think it
arm
would be
wrestle with
any
who wins.
building, school building, because remember, it's always on town-owned property.
Right.
Right.
So
But
it's,
see, if it's town property, the town, it's like East Bridgewater's a singleton, so they don't have this agreement with the district. So it's the district using it as a school, and the town, Lisa not sending me an email saying, hey, in 2033, Hanson Middle School is gonna be the senior center. You know what I mean? Because whatever.
we're gonna have a lot of old
Because
people.
Lisa and I won't be there at that point, we're gonna be retired, Go ahead, yeah, you can say that along the way. But I mean, those are the things I think the MSBA gets concerned about, especially when you have multi-town regional school districts, where there's 15 towns, and they're small, and a building that they build all of a sudden can't be inhabited by children,
That they've invested in.
and they've invested in. So there's a couple of towns out in the western part of the state that schools are closing even though they're 10 years old, because there's no enrollment. So I think that's a piece to say, do your best to make sure that they're filled by kids, because the state tax dollars pay for schools.
Right.
Gotcha.
So that'll be in the notes as we go. And then, I mean, this is something that was brought up and it's going to be a lengthy conversation, and we can open it up, but the non-mandated transportation costs. So briefly, when we do transportation costs, the Commonwealth, or the DESI, gives us reimbursables for students that live 1.5 miles outside of school. We submit reimbursables, the state reimburses us for that. However, we bill the towns at the tune of a per pupil rate, or in essence, what we assess the towns of enrollment. So right now, and I'm just gonna use the word 60/40, it's like 60.9, you know what I mean? It varies, but it's usually around 60/40 at this point. So for reimbursable transportation, we bill the towns at a 60/40 rate. So Whitman owes this much, Hanson owes this much. The state, at their whim, decides how much they're gonna reimburse us. It's supposed to be 100%. It can come in at 90%, it can come in at 65%. That's up to the discretion of the folks on Beacon Hill and what can be appropriated. Non-mandated transportation is something this district offers to students that live under 1.5 miles to 1/2 mile in school. So based upon where you live, the towns that have agreed to bus you to and from school within 1/2 mile to 1.5 miles. And the towns have picked up that cost. Much discussion back and forth because it's a strict financial on the town for the students riding that bus. And that right now is based on per pupil. It is not based on, it's on ridership, not on a 60/40 enrollment split for the district. It's specifically to Duval School, Conley School, Whitman Middle School, and the regional high school. Whitman students get a bill for their students that don't, that are 1.5 miles and under, and Hanson gets for Indian Head, Hanson Middle, and the high school, and 2 separate bills. There has been some discussion in the regional agreement that we should change that model to looking at the enrollment of 60/40. And that comes to the table because there's a financial impact on Whitman, and there's a financial impact on Hanson on that. Because if we move away from the ridership, there's going to be an increase in dollars from Hanson and a decrease from Whitman. So that's the topic that has to be addressed by this and voted on. In the agreement itself, it's still 60/40, and moving forward, that's subject to change. So I know Kathy, you brought this to us a couple of years ago too. You know?
Why has it been 60/40? Just because that was the split
Right,
way back
60%
when?
Whitman and 40% Hanson is the per pupil distribution. So the mandated costs are split 60/40. The non-mandated costs are split. Whitman pays for the Whitman kids and Hanson pays for the Hanson.
We don't do that for the mandated.
Because.
It's not like I want to, that's my question, like where did it, is it from the old agreement
That-
where?
Our best understanding looking back is that when we came up with the 93 agreement, in order to allow the towns to continue to provide non-mandated busing, it was an agreement to just pass that cost on to the towns. So it was the amount that it costs the district to do, yeah, but it's sort of what we do, but the district can seek reimbursement from the state at whatever formula it comes up with that's reasonable, and currently that just gets passed on to the towns.
Okay, we pause for a minute.
Yeah.
I apologize for being late. I do think it should be noted that the town of Whitman was misled. If you read the minutes of what they said, would cost less. Two things, so I do think it should be noted that when you
I was
approval,
just going to say, can you introduce yourself to the camera?
Rosemary Hill,
Yeah.
excuse my voice. But it should be noted that the towns were misled in that vote.
So now that we have a quorum, and I'll just pause for a minute, one of the items on the agenda was I don't want to function as chair for too much longer. Now that we have 3 people here who are voting members, I'm going to look for a nomination or for chair, and, a nomination in a second of who's interested in being
And there
chair.
are only 3 people.
There are only
who
3
can make
people
the
who can do that.
nominations.
Correct.
So I don't have to do
So
anything.
no, we don't have to do anything. It's one of the few times I don't have to say anything.
So who are the 3 that can?
So the voting members of the committee are Laura Kemet from Hanson, Hillary Niffen from Hanson, Justin Evans from Whitman, and Rosemary Hill from Whitman. Those are the 4 voting members of this committee.
Helen Niffen?
I would nominate it, yeah.
You accept that? Okay, awesome. So is there a nomination and an acceptance? Do I get a second on that nomination?
Michelle seconded.
Okay, all in favor of that?
Aye.
Okay, is it unanimous? Great, thank you.
Thank
I don't
you.
have a gavel to pass, but I'll pass the agenda
That's
over.
fine.
So you can start that conversation, so.
It's all yours now.
Yeah. So that's I don't want to say elephant in the room, but that's been a big conversation topic. Transportation in this district has been a topic of conversation for a while. Non-mandated versus mandated. Mandated by law, we have to transport our kids. So, and we do that, and we are held to the budget of the state, and sometimes it's very good for us, and sometimes we have to make real modifications based on that. The non-mandated piece, and we have come up with a different formula, and a mileage-based formula, and that's in the agreement now, that we talked about before. It used to be strictly per rider. We went to a mileage away from school, and it's advantageous to us from DESI. However, DESI has caught on to that a little bit more and are now asking more questions about the mileage-based method because they're, and I'm on camera, they're paying more because it's an avenue to give us more funding. And we've found a way to have it work for the regional school district.
Actually, it was Jay Sullivan who suggested it. I
Correct.
watched those meetings a couple of times.
He said you could do it.
There's this other way you could do it,
Yep.
and it's saved both Hanson and Whitman hundreds of thousands of
Correct.
dollars.
So looking for a different way. However, the non-mandated piece versus, and costs have been something that we've talked about. It has been a specific line item in the Whitman town meeting, and people have talked about not funding it, that would create a different paradox for the regional school district or for traffic patterns, because both elementary schools are on small roads, not major areas, and traffic would be challenging. We do have ridership, George, off the top of your head, how many kids are on the bus at Conley, for non-mandated, like 300?
Yeah, for non-mandated, roughly,
You know,
250 to 300.
and as we always deal with conversations with parents, a mile and a half, if, maybe back in the day when we walked uphill both ways in the snow, a mile and a half wasn't long, but a mile and a half now, we've driven the mile and a half, and we're like, it's a nice half-hour walk. And when school starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's a nice half-hour walk, So we've always encouraged the towns to support the non-mandated busing for the safety of the kids, for the getting to school on time, and to avoid some of the issues that happen when you don't have that. That being said, now it's the payment of that, and we're at the talk of, at this meeting, to figure out what we should be discussing at our boards.
I think one of the discussions, go ahead, Chair, thank you. One of the discussions that hasn't been had is the intent of this particular part of chapter. It's 70 or 71, but I think it might be wrong. But it's under 71. It is intended as a reward, essentially, for regionalizing. So it isn't a town thing, and it's really been a disappointment. This money is supposed to, generally, you see it going back to the school. So it isn't something that gives the town a discount. This is pulling money out of the school and giving it to the town, essentially. So it should be 60-40 split, essentially, is what I read it is the intent of it. So I do think with the history of how it was implemented in the beginning, how it was misled from the public from the beginning, even I think we can see our old town administrator standing up and saying, Whitman has opted to pay more, and at no point could I read in anything that Whitman had opted to pay more. So I do think we should start to look back at the intent of this particular aid and utilize it correctly. I think we've had lots of trouble from not utilizing aid correctly in the past. I think it's done a disservice to the taxpayers of both towns and the students. I want to also mention that, excuse me, please, I'm so sorry about my voice, that when we do this, we leave room for all kinds of moving of money that shouldn't be, or possible over procurement when we do this. Essentially, we want to make sure that we're doing it straightforward, accidentally, of course, purposely, but doing things straightforward, because these are whole bus systems or whole systems. If we can use the whole system, I think we can get our best rate and do things in a straightforward way.
I just wanna, go ahead, Catherine.
And my position on this is much more succinct. The language, section 5B in the current agreement, in my opinion, is convoluted. It has two tiers, one for mandated, one for non-mandated. I have read at least a dozen other regional agreements, and when I get to the transportation, it is crystal clear. Some do not trust non-mandated. Ridgeway-Raynham, for instance, does not, so that's clear. Others state transportation is the responsibility of the district and will be split per pupil. We've got this mandated and then a second paragraph saying, and if the towns choose to pay for the non-mandated, and it's crazy, it is crazy. There's no other agreement that has that language in it. So I think cleaning up the agreement to reflect what virtually every other regional school district has for transportation language would be fair to both towns.
Right. I think, and we may have been in a meeting, it may have been Jay Sullivan or someone who said kind of just that, like, the district is in charge of the transportation.
School committee is.
And,
School
correct.
committee is.
Yeah.
And so, rather than, like, they kind of advised against bumping it out as a separate line item
Sure.
to the towns. And so in that regard, it would go into our whole budget and you would split it the same way we do now per pupil. I think Whitman-Hanson for this are very different. There are not sidewalks in Hanson. Kids cannot walk, I mean, they kind of can walk safely to Hanson Middle as long as you live off of 58. And same with Indian Head, but once you go down McQuon Street or any other, Whitman Street, anywhere else, even if you come out of Hanson Middle and take a right as opposed to a left, like you're done with that sidewalk. There's no sidewalk. So, and have the towns ever said no to paying for it as a separate line item? I mean, I've only been in Hanson for 10 years.
But I think the towns were told, from what I can read when I go through the minutes, at least Whitman was told, hey, if Hanson decides not to have busing, we can still provide busing for our students, which was an inaccurate statement, is misleading. So I do think that that's something that should be noted.
But you've been around for a while, right? Lisa, you were there for a while. What was that voted at that?
Finance committee's recommended different values,
Yes.
it's come close,
Correct,
but.
yeah,
Okay.
right, but it's never,
So that-
not on the floor. And Hanson was almost like, this is a no-brainer because there's no sidewalks. I mean,
Yeah,
that was something
we don't have sidewalks,
And then
there's
people attack.
crossing guards, nothing.
But to be honest too, when we first started looking at this 5 years ago, when Whitman's money was looking at $500,000 for non-mandated, you brought that figure to me. Hanson was 105 maybe. It's never gotten to that $500,000 phase. Again, readjusting how we bill that and from the state level on using a mileage percentage, which is accepted by the state, we say it again, it's accepted by the state, has given us the opportunity to cut that bill in half.
Right.
And I think there was less concern about that number, but it could go away unless it's, and Jay did say that in a meeting, the school committee is responsible for transporting kids. It's in the law that they have to do that. And how they decide to not transport, you can say, we're not going to, in a regional district, not transport under 1.5 miles. In a town, the town I do, they have to transport certain grades, and then they can have a bill for other kids.
It's like that in Pembroke too.
It's
That's
a
right,
right,
yeah.
that's
You
wrong.
pay for
You
busing.
pay for busing. As a regional district, we really can't charge for that, and under 1.5 miles, and former town administrator, I said, do you want me to do that? We can vote that at town, and both towns would have difficulty gathering that money, because it wouldn't be coming to the district, it would be you guys accepting that. So we went away from that to keep the non-mandated in. So I think that's something that, it is the district's responsibility under transportation, and Kathleen's correct in that there's two differing numbers there, and most regional agreements are consistent, so.
And just kind of echoing what Jeff said, I think one of the reasons that it took so long for us to consider other methods like the mileage method is because the school committee just calculated this number and assessed it to the towns as a flat number. This is what it costs, this is what they pay. And if it were to come back in as one formula, this is an operating cost, the school committee then has its own incentive to reduce costs by getting creative with the reimbursement formula.
My only concern, and this maybe is off topic, I guess the only concern I would have with putting it into the operating cost, which it absolutely is an operating cost, is we're always cutting our operating budget, right? And so I do think that for that reason, if you separate out the bus, it does show, because the normal person is not going to factor in the however much, because the millions of dollars that it is, what is it, 2 million here?
Yeah, it's about to-
Right, they're not gonna see that, they're gonna think that it's going to something else, so that's where I pause, and I do have more caution about how we present it to the towns on that piece of it, because I would hate to cut services of learning, teaching and learning to the students for transportation. And, I think about what that we want. But I think the thing we have to figure out here is this language, because Kathy, I agree with you. I think that whatever we have here, whoever MacGyvered this, and it's a lot to wrap your brain around. I guess the question that I have, and maybe this is a question for you, and if it's on this document, I apologize. If you took FY '24 numbers and went with the per pupil, what would the costs be? Is it here, am I missing it?
Well, you don't want to do per pupil, you want mileage.
No, okay, but.
Using the enrollment method.
That's what I mean,
Yes.
okay, that's what I mean.
It's right here, there's a shift of $54,000. This
So,
document was created by me.
okay, so on the back of the document, is that where I can find that
It
number?
shows- Yes, it's from document 20 of the fiscal '24 budget documents. And it shows that if we were to do a 60-40 split, 60.61 versus 39.39, you'd have what Whitman would pay and what Hanson would pay, compared to what Whitman did pay and Hanson did pay. Right? So the total that Whitman paid was $305,352.
Okay,
If we split it 60-40, Whitman would have paid $251, $308. So there's a shift, and I'm being completely honest,
oh, yeah.
so that people know that the money, there will be a shift from one town to the other, because Hanson is so much bigger than Whitman.
Yep.
We're twice as big, more than twice as
Yes,
big.
we are.
We have fewer kids who qualify for mandated, and a lot of kids who qualify for non-mandated. So we're paying for 60% of the mandated cost and 100% of the Whitman non-mandated cost. So to my way of thinking, this is what it's going to cost, Hillary, based on the 90%
The
reimbursement.
163
I
would
would,
be.
I would actually
Just-
want to see it through the school district rather than through the Whitman Finance Committee.
Sure.
Well, I really.
Different numbers, they could be different numbers. Whitman can tell us one thing, we were told something on the, we've been on the butt end of a lot of it recently, with the shift in the per pupil versus the standardized methodology. We've
Statutory.
Yeah, statutory versus the actual, and we kind of with the brunt of that as well. It took us a couple of years to recover from that, which we have somewhat recovered. But this is going to be an issue.
Hillary,
So
And that's why I
see
said it's a
different
hot
num-
button.
you know,
just some footnotes here. One is that we can offset this a little bit more, but we have to rethink differently, so that might not be the total cost. I think Justin Evans said something pretty smart, is that when it comes to school, we can be more cost effective in terms of, people might not like having the max, a bus ride legally, it can be an hour. And that's what regularly is happening in other towns. If you live further away from the school,
Again, I can tell you my kids are miserable.
I know.
And I can't get there to pick them up, so
so
I don't,
I know
and
that-
when we first did that, it was bad. I mean, I hear what you're saying,
I'm
but
just
there are
saying that
definitely
as far as
things
cost
we
goes,
can look at.
before we take from education.
Yep.
Additionally, we can increase the size of our buses, and we can do that for different ones, but there are things that we can do. I think we purchased smaller buses. I think there was a COVID thing, and a lot of people had pitched it. So we could increase the size of the buses to reduce the cost, that'll reduce labor. So those are some of the opportunities we have when we do this internally. We're so flexible. I agree that it was miserable. My children were in Whitman, and now we're on the bus at sometimes, like, 45 minutes on the bus, at packed buses. And I was over on Franklin Street, it was walkable essentially. We chose to walk sometimes. Not Franklin, on Harvard Street at the time. So,
But just to answer your question, if we were to come bring it back. I think that the idea, using these numbers is the idea, but I mean, as we move into, and again, this is not gonna get voted maybe this year, so Stephen would put together our FY '25 numbers, because I'd like real numbers anyway as we get into FY '25, so you're looking at and bringing back to your boards the real numbers of what this is. But on paper, and this is why I said, you know, this is gonna be a topic, and this is why, you know, it's gonna be an ongoing, because there is a shift, and it's a financial shift, moving to that. Now, that being said, the populations of both communities are in shift too, and that cost might shift over time. I'm not saying in 5 years that Hanson's gonna have 50% and Whitman's gonna have 50%, but there is a definite shift as we go, and as we look at numbers, there might not always be 60-40. But as we move into that, but this is why I say that, you know, in all honesty, Catherine brought it up, and this is the conversation piece that George had, like, yeah, this is the, you know, the one that's gonna be challenging, because it's a financial shift, you know.
We also have to look at the number of schools, you know, where the buses are going, what's the number of schools? In Hanson, there's 2 schools, Indian Head and McQuon. McQuon's not there anymore. Indian Head and middle school, and then the high school. I don't know what's in Whitman, I know there's Conley.
Conley,
Duval,
Duval.
and
Middle
there's
school.
3.
Okay, so there's 3, and then the high school. So, you know, going, I know that the buses in Hanson, they're only going to 2 schools, so.
Well, when we
Well,
use our
no, in
buses.
Hanson, I'm
Yeah,
talking
right.
in Hanson.
Gotcha,
they're
gotcha,
only going to
gotcha.
2 schools.
What would the consideration be to no longer recognize the town split? We're a full region now. That would reduce some buses and have kids go to neighborhood schools. Some kids in Hanson and in Duval. I know, just a thought.
But I don't think,
You mean by
because
location?
the neighborhood school, the Hanson neighborhoods are across 58.
I think so.
So they're not neighborhood schools like you have at Duval and Conley.
Right.
Like you cannot get on a sidewalk and get there. That's the point of,
You have to cross.
you have to
Route
cross
58.
58, so like,
Both schools.
for Indian Head and
I
for,
was thinking more in terms of
So
kids going to Whitman.
Yeah, you were.
yes, so to go to Duval, so the neighborhoods, so if you take like Birch Bark, right? That's right on that curve at 58, there's not a sidewalk to get there. So that's not a neighborhood school, because the neighborhood school, I don't know if there's an actual definition on DESI, is you can walk there safely,
Yeah.
but you can walk there safely.
Yeah, I think that's why
And
they.
there's no sidewalks,
You
you
can't
can't
walk
do
anywhere
that.
in Hanson safely.
Where are we with safe routes to schools? They fund sidewalks. Have we adopted that yet?
We are not adopting that. It's up to the schools to look at that.
Because I thought we could do it as a district when I talked to them.
I'm not looking at safety use of school, and this is not the conversation right now.
I'm just in terms of getting a sidewalk so that we can consider and adapt during.
And again, what I'd like to, not a bad idea, but I don't want to trust the state to give me money to put sidewalks into
Right.
the towns.
Yeah.
And make that, because great idea, but they'll go, okay, here's this amount of money, and then stop the amount of money we're in the middle of that. So I think that's a different conversation about that piece of it. I do think that we have talked about, and it was brought up before, listen, if your proximity to Duval, or even proximity to Whitman Middle School, is there an opportunity to change this agreement? We've never talked about that. When I brought up, or the former school committee member talked about a regional middle school, and people lost their minds a little bit, or another, you know, changing the agreement so that Hanson kids went to Whitman and not truly a regional district, that was a conversation that was stopped a little bit. Don't cross that at this point. We still want to be Hanson, we still want to be Whitman. We'll go to the regional high school at this point. But there is some conversation to say, if you live over on this side, that if you're to save costs or whatever, would you want to be a Duval Dolphin instead of
I
going?
would close with the Hanson Middle School, wouldn't know.
So, I mean, you know what I'm saying, you know, you guys are, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm asking the chair, Jeff, not you.
Yeah, I know, you look right through me, so.
So I'm just wondering, a couple of things. So if we look at the agreements that we have in front of us today in the staple, if you go to the very first page, there's a key. You know, I was a former geography teacher, but it says, there's black, there's green, there's blue, there's red. We did a little bit of it with the very first one where we talked about red in the lease language. However, I guess I have a twofold. I'm wondering if for the next meeting, we should all, because we have some new members here, we should all be able to digest this color scheme and go through it, to then bring back comments to talk about on what was already either decided, looked at, happy with, and then have that discussion, and then new proposals. Because we know that we have the elephant, let's say, in the room that might be transportation in general. But then Mrs. Hill says that we might want to look at other things like restructuring, then that would be another new piece. But then we might be able to just clean up, okay, are there 14 things that we already still like, the new committee still likes? And my other ask is that the norm used to be that we go for an hour straight, plan the next meeting and move forward. I'm just wondering if that's still available, or
Sounds good to me.
should I plan something else for dinner, because it's
No,
my night?
sounds good. I do think because the last time we met, January 2024, or December 23, the busing thing, I think we need to figure out, and we need to get it figured out. I think once we get that, then we can talk about language about re-regionalizing or things like that. I think that, this is the bigger piece. It's got that financial piece to it. I just wanna understand process a little bit. If we all here decide that, or the voting members decide to do the 60-40 split, that's not meaning that it's bound, right? It's gotta be approved by the school committee and by both select boards. Is that correct?
And
Well,
And yes,
I mean,
Town,
just,
and by the town.
right, but I mean,
Overall, yes.
I know that the agreement overall has to be agreed, but I just mean like for us to move forward in this process,
Yes.
is all I'm saying,
Okay.
before we send it off to the towns.
Correct.
So I think that figuring this out, would make the most sense. I think, to your point, having numbers from the district as opposed to, I don't know if they're going to be different, might make, if that's gonna make someone feel better, if you bring it back to your finance committee, and if, Laura's not here, but, to see like this is a nonpartisan, like,
Steve, how hard?
monies are monies.
It's not hard,
Right,
yeah.
Right,
We can,
just addition, subtraction,
Right.
multiplication, and division.
right.
Yeah.
For optics sake, so I don't know, I would like to get this busing thing situated.
The bus thing, one part, the bus, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Jeff and part of the transportation too, I think we had started to talk about this, was the out-of-district
Yes.
transportation. In research I have done, basically contacting other regional districts, the regional district, they handle the transportation. Everyone that I talked to said, no, the school handles the transportation to out-of-district, not the town
You
district.
mean out of district to special ed,
Out-of-district, the vocational schools.
Bristol and North State?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Can you show examples of that? Because I've seen different. Can you show examples of that? Because I've seen different.
It's just, I've talked to every other town manager who is in a regional district.
And they're
And they
handling the
said-
applications.
The districts handle the transportation vocational. It doesn't fall like on the town administrator.
It probably goes in the operational budget, which is, right,
Well, we pay for it. I mean, there's no question on paying for it.
It's just
It's
with the district.
coordinating it.
Mhm.
It's hiring the vans and coordinating it.
Yep.
Because Mary Beth and I have been through nightmares trying to get this straightened out. We don't have the resources to do it. And what happens is, we get a parent who calls us, they're angry about this. We have the company that's calling us saying, look if you don't send me my check tomorrow, I'm not picking up your kids. So in our world, everything comes to a halt, panic sets in, what are we gonna do? We got this company who's saying, I'm not gonna pick your kids up. What do we do? Then, we do the bidding and all that. We don't have the resources to do it. And so, like I said, DESI interprets that language to say, well, it says the school committee is responsible. However, if you're in a regional school district, each town has their own school committee, and Hanson doesn't, so you guys are out of luck. So you're SOL. To me, and our town council does not agree with that interpretation. So they stand ready to take more of this on, but we're kind of taking a step back to see if we can somehow, work it through here. it's just a nightmare, and to get calls from parents complaining to us about the van is late, they get lost, you know, it's like, okay, what do you want me to do about it? And it really, it tests your ability to be calmness, professionalism, especially one particular parent who will call you on anything. So, yeah, so we do want to
So can I give you
approach
background on that too?
about that.
So Lisa
yeah.
and Mary Beth and I have talked about this, and I think it's something that the district would be more than willing to adjust to, but we have to have some contingencies around that. And to me, I don't understand why you were responsible for vocational transportation in the first place.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but that means the South Shore vocational transportation will funnel through us, and that would mean operating costs coming to the district would be
Increase.
more. And again, your concern there is when you see the number.
South Shore is a regional.
Well,
South Shore
South Shore
vocational.
handles their own
we're-
transportation, they've
yeah,
got
we're
like
member
their whole
towns.
department,
That's-
it's
that's-
just,
talking about
and
consulting
Norfolk
members.
actually is
Yeah.
handled through Abington. But Bristol is like, not us.
I
Not your
understand,
problem.
but if you're gonna go with vocational, I'm not gonna, because there's
Oh,
these
break
little
it
things
out.
doing
Yeah,
this,
Right,
you
you
know,
gotta
and
see that part of it,
You gotta be
yeah.
balanced.
You know,
It's nothing.
Issue.
and maybe not all or nothing, but it used to be, you know, I sign off on vocational students, and I never understood why, then I would just say, here you go, pay the bill.
Yep.
So that could come in, but it's an operational cost as we go, and that has to be thought through, because as people see the school district budget went up $500,000 for vocational ed, but that was really out of your budget, but nobody sees that piece. So it really would have to be spelled out so that people aren't seeing in 2027, when this happens, that the district budget went up 13.5%, when it really didn't. Because we are, and nothing against vocational schools, it's a different process. They accept or deny whom they want, when they want. They can accept a student up until the first day of school, and then the town is burdened to pay for that student. And if they come back, it's our responsibility, even though the town has already paid the vocational. So there's this back and forth on that. And there is more students are looking at other vocationals other than South Shore. So South Shore tells you you have 8 students, you have 20 students, you kind of have an idea every year. Bristol Aggie, Norfolk Aggie, and what's the other one I'm missing? Those are the 2, right?
Yeah, Southeastern, we don't.
In Southeastern, we've had a couple, or Blue Hills is another one, but a student can apply, and I'm not gonna, and I'll say this, I'm not gonna be the superintendent to deny a vocational opportunity for a child. And I sent it to Lisa on May 31st, and your budget's already passed. You know, and folks don't understand that, taxpayers don't understand that, finance committees don't understand, you know, you see it, and you're like, how come we got this bill? And transportation, and this came to a head, and I know with Lisa, we are also bound as a school district and town to bus students who may be homeless or in DCF custody, who may not live in our town, but go to a school. So a bill came to Hanson for a student that was from Hanson, who was living in another community, and had to get bused to a vocational school, and it was very expensive. And the rides there are very expensive.
So they came from Hanson?
They live in Hanson,
Oh, okay.
they were removed or in a better living environment due to being in custody of the Department of Children and Families, and then still had to go, because the law says go to the school you're still attending, and it's a longer commitment of travel. That happens in the regional district all the time. Students are outplaced, students are moved from their homes or homeless, and we incur that cost, and your finance committee sometimes don't understand that when a student is moved or becomes homeless and are now living in Dorchester, say, I have to transport that student at the tune of $275 a day, or $50,000 a year. And taxpayer doesn't understand that, but that's the law.
I think you're 100% right, though.
So the towns are really
I don't think
struggling.
the finance committee's actually understood
And
that.
the district is okay with assisting in that, in the agreement, as long as it works for the district as well.
With proper filing, those are all 100% reimbursable. And it should go from the town of origin. So if we have somebody who's moved to Hanson due to homelessness and from Dorchester, and Dorchester is the responsible
Correct, but we'll-
party.
it's the
So
other
I just,
way around.
so if it's the other way around,
We
we have to put it up front, which is why we probably need better stabilization. And then it is reimbursed 100% for both of it should be.
That's not what I was told by Jay Sullivan.
Right.
He's like, you get
what
like
you
a
get.
dollar
You
or
get
something.
your
Can I give
appropriation.
you the number of the lady who handles it? She's in New Bedford.
So I
So,
talked to Jay Sullivan directly, and he said, you get like a dollar. I said, you know what, $1 is better than nothing, Jay, so.
but I understand, and so
Yeah.
this isn't something that we've talked about, but we need to have some language around that, because you're not equipped to do that. We're not necessarily equipped to do that, but we're more equipped than you guys are to do it. And I don't know, Mary Beth and I had that conversation 3 years ago when this was starting, and I know, but, and again, you say Abington, I don't know what they do, because we don't have any,
Right.
there's no consistent communication around the vocational school, the various vocational schools. Southeastern's fine. We work with Southeastern, that's not an issue. It's the other ones that are one-offs.
So I think in the essence of time,
Just one thing for busing that was missed. 6 months ago, Kathy was at the meeting with us, and we brought up the mileage method in a chapter 70. Who was at, we went to a chapter 70 meeting.
Oh, good, yes.
And it was,
Tracy Novak.
Tracy Novak basically said, I wouldn't count on the mileage method. I think it's.
we heard that from John Stambrook last year, last,
I would-
like fall, him
So
telling us
I think
that
when
Desi
we're
was
planning this
kind of.
forward, I think we should expect that this bill is gonna be higher than it is, and be thinking, both towns' sake, how we can reduce those numbers.
So I think, and I don't know, I guess I'm reiterating what I said earlier, I think that before we can kind of get anything else, we need to handle the transportation piece. Are we going to, I think the select boards will have meetings, but will we have a school committee meeting before we meet again?
That's a-
Because I think
I would hope so. Our school committee meeting's on the 13th.
13th.
It's already, I was thinking we were gonna be meeting as RAC before that.
Right, because I was thinking if we, to finance committees, I don't know how often you all meet,
We don't have anything scheduled.
maybe you should look to schedule something to say, this is the conversation, this is how it's going. And like, I'd be happy to come and explain it if it's like the mandated versus non-mandated. But I would like to really kind of get this language figured out, because I do think that this is the biggest piece, because it's that the financial piece tied to it. And then we can look, like George, your idea to look at the other stuff. So does that sound okay with everybody for the next meeting?
Yes.
I mean, I think this is like the 4th time we've talked about the buses, and I think we need to like, make a decision, yes.
Wednesday the 20th as our next meeting. That gives people a month. School committee meets at between that time.
I will be coming from Pittsfield,
Okay.
so I'll call it if I need to.
Okay. Is that okay?
Wednesday the 20th?
Okay.
So we're meeting now on Wednesdays, before it was Mondays, and that's fine, that's fine. Wednesday.
Yeah, it is. Are we gonna stick with this kind of time?
Is 4:30 okay?
Because you'll have school committee meetings from time to time.
All right, we'll do it.
So you need to get out of here in time.
Well, that's what I prefer,
Yeah.
like even if I have
Sure, double
to
dip in.
bring friends.
Just about candy.
Right.
I don't even buy candy.
Yeah, I got it. We're good.
All right, so the 20th at 4:30.
That's fine.
And then, so I guess I would ask everybody, everybody got this email to them too, right?
It was part of the.
Yeah, it was part of the packet. So looking at it and then discussing the potential change in the conversations around it with our respective boards, and sort of where that's coming from and what the impacts might be. And I think also, I mean, I'm happy to do it too, looking, like Kathy said, looking at other regional agreements. I mean, our agreement is, like, what does South Shore VOTEC have? Like, that would be the one I would go to. But that would be the one I would go to,
But
right?
nobody walks to
We're already
South
in
Shore.
there.
Nobody
No,
walks.
but you know what I mean?
It's the non-mandated part that's the problem.
Yeah, so,
It's per pupil. South Shore VOTEC is per pupil.
I'll see what I can find out with like regionals. So there's BR, there's DY, there's Dayton Rehoboth,
Yeah.
there's,
I have a
I
whole
don't-
slew of
you-
them.
you-
Up in Sturbridge area.
Groton,
Dunstable,
Dunstable.
Dunstable is Triton,
There's
there's.
Mendon, Upton.
Yep.
There's a few, and what I don't want to do is look at some of the regionals that are like Acton, Boxborough, where their per
Lincoln
pupil costs
Sudbury.
are, they're spending a lot more than we do. They're more in line with our communities, so.
Andover Lawrence might have an interesting split.
Who's?
Andover Lawrence might have an interesting
Yeah,
split.
that's true. So the 20th, and you have homework assignments, everything will be in the Google Docs too, on Google, in general, send out the, whatever else we covered today.
How hard, Steve, would it be for you to generate the equivalent of what I did, but you doing it so it's not, oh, this person in Whitman, put these numbers together?
Only-
It's not hard.
It's not
I mean,
It's not hard.
I would say, you know, I can probably, within the next couple of weeks, have something out.
And you know that, like, I trust you as a colleague, as a finance person, but you also understand that if we come to Hanson and say, this person on the Whitman Finance Committee came up with these numbers, I will be burned at the stake.
I am completely, no offense taken.
Yes, you will.
Right, so I think if it's, you know, that's
I
all.
did not know what the end result was going to be. It wasn't like, oh, yay. It's like, I don't know what the number's going to show. Oh, this is going to be troublesome. And Laura actually thought at the last meeting that Hanson was going to make out like bandits, and I said,
No,
no.
I think she thought we were.
She thought that
Again,
Whitman-
it's like she was under the impression that it was gonna cost us as well, and that was just another thing that we would have to look at as a cost.
But I can tell you, and I said it to her at the last meeting, the number one thing that parents talk about, complain about, either through email, at the field, on the PTO pages, are the buses. Are the transportation from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade, and then high school, no one seems to matter because they get rides anyway and things like that.
They
But
drive themselves.
so when we talk about these things and we talk about the cost, we do have to understand that there are kids attached to it, and regardless of how much more it's gonna be or how much less it's gonna be,
Do we have to,
you know, we have to do that.
do we have to provide, like, could we do full busing for the lower grades and then, what do we have to do?
I think regional, by law, we have to provide to everyone a mile and a half and
A
away.
mile and a half, this is it.
The state
What it's
says,
saying.
2 miles and above, reimbursable at a mile and a half. George and I found that little loophole when we looked at that, so we
So
can
we're
get more money.
reimbursable at a mile and a half,
Yep.
right? Do we have to provide for the high school kids a bus
Yes.
under a
Yes.
mile and a half?
No,
No, we don't have to provide for anybody under a mile.
Okay, can we split it, but if we don't, we provide it for the younger kids, but don't provide it for the high school
that's
kids.
up to the school.
That will most of them are empty anyway.
I don't know if most of them, I work at a high school, I don't, I know that we see, but I think, I'm not for getting rid of buses for kids. There are too many kids who have parents who don't do what they're supposed to do and don't get them to school, and then it becomes a school problem, and there's a lot of things, and I think if the state law says we need to provide buses for kids, we provide buses for kids.
I'm
And
just talking for
that's
the
what we do.
mile and a half part, the non-mandated, the older kids, that it would be safe to walk. If, and I'm just talking in terms of, in the end, if like younger kids can't be on the bus for the maximum amount of time, it's a way that we can shift. It's the only thing I'm thinking about.
No, but how, didn't we say there were like 5 non-mandated
I was
kids
gonna
at
say
Whitman
there's
Hanson?
one.
Right,
One
there's
kid.
one, so it's
Oh,
not gonna,
walking
It's
now?
not even.
it's not worth it,
No,
we've done that.
it's
We've done
We've done
about
this, we've had
this.
these conversations.
I'm new to this
Yeah.
conversation.
Well, it was one. a few
It
years
was
ago.
one a
It's-
few
it's-
years ago.
It's not one anymore. It's, you're not talking dozens, but you're talking more. And when I said I took the drive, mile and a half's a nice little half-hour walk. at 6
When we're
o'clock,
talking
6
about
o'clock.
numbers too, these two towns are about to shift and change rapidly. You have buildings going in next to the train right now. You have a lot of building going in. They're going to shift, and it might just be that Whitman is the wealthier town, so the statutory would shift as well. All of these things shift with the EQV and your available monies, including population. So these numbers aren't steadfast. Kathy gave you a past number. And that,
It changes every year.
it changes every year, but
And the
so does your
reimbursement rate
ability
from
to
the
pull
state changes
revenue.
every year.
The
That's
same
the other
way.
really crazy piece.
It's insane.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
Rosemary, you have to second it now.
Second.
There's only 3 people who can talk.
Okay, all those in favor?
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
24:30.